All right, so for this final spreadsheet, you're going to come up with what is essentially a balance sheet calculating how much money you make in 1 month, and then how much money you would spend in 1 month, and then kind of how much is left over. So it's got some complex calculations, but the worksheet does kind of work you through it. One of the first things it tells you to do is it's going to assume you get a $50 allowance, but then you have other income opportunities. So I'm going to say, lawn mowing is something that I used to do during the summertime, and I would get paid, $10 a lawn or something like that. So I'm going to say $60 a month, meaning, I mowed a lawn once a week, and I had a couple other ones in there. Then you need to come up with a function to add those two together. That's up to you to figure it out. The worksheet's not telling you specifically how to do this. At this point, you should be able to add two numbers together. I don't want you to manually add those in your head and just type in the number. It needs to be a formula or a function. All right, then you're going down here, and it's going to tell you that you need to come up with not only how many times per month you're going to use each of these types of expenses, but also how much those expenses cost you. So, for example, to come up with savings, it says here it needs to be a minimum of 10% of your allowance. So what you need to do here in a formula is figure out how do you find out 10% of your allowance. Your allowance is right here, which is $50. So if you were to do an equal and 10%, 10% is 0.10 times your monthly allowance. All right, so if you're looking at that formula, it says 10%, or the decimal version of it is 0.10 times your allowance, which happens to be B2. Press enter, and it's telling you, okay, that's going to be $5 per month. You can then also decide how many times a month you want to do that. So if you get allowance, a couple of times a month or whatever, maybe you want to put savings in twice a month, so $10 is what it'll end up being. How many times a month do you want to go to the movies? You need to leave these expenses as what they are, $7.50. Lunch, assume it costs $3.50. iTunes, assume it costs $1.29. It tells you in the directions all the different things that you are allowed to change and not allowed to change. When you come up with the formula here, it should be telling you how much you're spending, and that should be an easy, obvious one of how many times a month you're using it and how much it costs. So easily, savings would be 2 times 5. That's 10, but instead of typing a 10 here, you need to come up with a formula that calculates that. All right, something here for lunch, it tells you to type in a value. And then this one here is an expense of your choice. You need to come up with something else you would spend money on per month, whatever your particular hobby happens to be. And then you start coming down here, and like total amount spent, that's just adding together all the things you spent. That's a simple formula to add together this string of numbers. And then the amount remaining is an even simpler formula. It's simply subtracting two things. It's subtracting how much money you have, which is total income, minus your total amount of money spent, and that's how much money you have left over. So again, it should be a formula, and at this point you should be able to kind of calculate how those formulas are created.